I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. And now, without further ado, I'd like to introduce our speaker tonight, Michael Back, Quartermaster Second Class on the USS Frank. First Class. Did I turn you on? Okay.
First, I want to thank Don, Lee, and also Brandon Tracy for inviting me to speak to your group about my days aboard a destroyer during World War II. The way I got involved as a speaker here, Brandon called me up about a year and a half ago, and he said, I'd like to interview you about your days in World War II. I said, where'd you get my name from? He said, well, I called the Naval Historical Foundation in Washington, D.C., and I see you're a speaker on their program. And he said, I'd like to come down on a Sunday morning and interview you about your days in the Navy. I said, Sunday's a bad day. He said, I can't come any other day because I work and I go to school besides. He said, I'll come and I'll buy you breakfast Sunday morning. I said, it's a deal. And that's why I'm here now. Anyway, thank you very much. You know, when you're aboard a destroyer for 31 months, you're witness to a lot of events that happen aboard the ship. Some are bizarre, some are unbelievable, and some are happy, some are sad, some are historical. So my slide presentation today is going to go about my 31 months aboard the USS Frank's DD-554. I want to set the projector up over here to give him a shot to get a clearing of the... Can you get the lights out? We could? During World War II, after World War II was over, there was a Rear Admiral in the Naval Institute in Annapolis, Maryland, by the name of E.M. Eller, Rear Admiral. He was director of the History Division of the Naval Institute in Annapolis, Maryland. And he wrote an epilogue about World War II about 10 years after the war was over. And I'd like to quote him and base my presentation today about the memory of his epilogue. And it goes as follows, and I quote, these are not my words, but the Admiral Eller. It says, men are the Navy, yet they live in ships. On the far spaces of the sea, they become knit together. Ship and crew forge into a single powerful unit to serve the United States in peace and war. The ship is their home, their weapon, their faith, and their pride. Men who have served in a ship are always interested in the ship. When they have served and trained for their country and fought in the ship, it becomes part of them, and they in turn part of her forever after. So here I am about 50 years later, 60 years later, talking about days that happened in the Navy that happened to me many years ago. The reason I have the battleship New Jersey, as I said before, many things happened aboard my ship during the World War II, one of which we had a collision with the battleship New Jersey. And we survived the collision. It was a nighttime collision, and there was only one fatality of on board the ship, and that was our captain.
If you'd sit, you'd be less obstructing. Can you do that?
Yeah, I can do that, yeah.
Then you'd be less in their way.
I myself was down below decks. I was off duty. I was a quartermaster. I got off duty at 8 o'clock at night. We were on ships 4 hours on and 8 hours off. I was down below decks, sleeping in the stern of the ship, when I heard this tremendous jolt. I thought we got hit by a torpedo or a mine, and I immediately went topside. I was the first guy topside in my shorts. It was cold out. We were the same latitude about New York in April, and it was cold. And fortunately, we did not sink. The anchor of the New Jersey ripped us in half lengthwise, port to port, and cut off the wing of the bridge, and the guy lines were canted and were broken. So anyway, that was where I was. But I want to go on now. I'll tell you more about, I'll show you photographs of the before and after of the ship's damage. So that's the Ulithi Atoll. This is the atoll where the advanced base was for ships when they went out going towards Okinawa and the Philippines and so forth to fight war. Now this is my ship, the USS Frank's DD-554. I came on board the Franks on July 30th, 1943. Prior to that, I was in the quartermaster school in Great Lakes, Illinois for 4 months. I didn't know what a quartermaster was. I never saw a destroyer before in my life. Here I am in school now, and I put into destroyer duty, and they sent me out to Seattle, Washington, where the ship was just built, and I came on board as a plank owner. In July 30th, 1944, we had a commissioning ceremony. As I said before, we had 324 men on board that ship at that time. About 15% of the men were at the sea before. Everybody else was a brand new recruit coming from the schools, 18, 19 years old. And you're going to see some photographs how young we looked in those days. So this is the ship that I was on. And my duty station was, I mentioned before, was the bridge. On the upper part of the bridge itself, we had special sea detail. When the ship took off, we had what was called special sea detail. And I was immediately on the bridge, and that spot right over there, that was the area of my duty. During general quarters, I was at the same area. During my watch, it was 4 hours on and 8 hours off. So I had a chance to hear and see everything that was going on between the officers, between the crew, between the captain and the men and so forth. Yeah, one of my duties was to enter everything that happened in a log. We were 4 hours on, 8 hours off, and then we had assigned a log when we were finished. Anything that ever happened aboard ship. If we fired guns, when we started firing. If we fired what kinds of guns, we had to put that down. If we came alongside a ship, we had to put the name of the ship down, the exact time we were there. So everything that happened aboard the ship happened, and I happened to be in, when I was on watch, I was there to see it happening. So it was like sitting in the middle of a football field and a quarterback telling signals. I heard everything and saw everything was going on, and the ship is so small and the bridge is so small, you can find and you knew what was going on. So that was my ship. I left the ship in January the 10th, 1946, after the war was over. When we came to Seattle, Washington, we were a brand new ship. The ship was painted gray. And we got to Honolulu, and the first time we were away from the United States, Honolulu was loaded with ships, aircraft carriers, battleships, cruisers, destroyers. And most of these ships had flags, of Japanese flags, of planes they shot down or islands they bombed. And we went out in a gray painted ship. We would look like rookies, which we were. We couldn't wait till we get shot at so we could put a painting up on our ship to be a little salty. So that was our ship. On 4 Japanese planes in attacks and kamikazes, and we also were involved in 4 close-shore bombardments of islands. And that means you're an alley cat, you're there about 2 miles away from the beach, a mile, 2 miles, and firing, helping the Marines and the Army in their attempts to attack the enemy. So that was the part of the ship. Alongside, in the middle, we sank 1 submarine. We didn't know the name of the submarine that we sank until the end of the war. We sank a submarine called the I-176. And I was on the internet one day playing around. I looked at put in the keyword Japanese submarines. Out came the Japanese submarine descriptions of all their ships, and come in there with submarines, and the I-176 sunk by the USS Frank, so it made me feel pretty good. We had an oil slick 7 miles long and a half mile wide when the submarine was sunk. We had 2 other destroyers go in first, and they put all their ash cans over the side and their K-guns, and they ran out of ammunition, so we were the 3rd ship to come in, and we finally got to sink. The I-6. In 1984, we got out of the Navy. I never talked about the Navy to my kids. My children never heard a story from me until after 1984. I got a letter from a fellow by the name of Paul Stilwell, who was writing a book called Battleship New Jersey. He wrote me a letter and said, I understand you're on a destroyer that collided with a battleship New Jersey and survived. He said, I'd like to interview you about your comments about the collision. And we met in Annapolis, Maryland, and I had a chance to be interviewed, and he put his comments, my comments, in his book called Battleship New Jersey. And it's by Paul Stilwell. When I was in Annapolis, after interviewing, he said to me, "You'd make a good oral historian." And I said, "What's an oral historian?" He said, "We'd like to do a story of your life. You won't get paid for it, but we'd like to publish it and have it available for researchers who want to write about World War II, what a destroyer man lived in World War II." I says, "Fine." He said, "We'll give you 3 books. They'll be covered." And so they did a story of my life. That's how I got involved with with Paul Stillwell and the Naval Institute. About the same time, our ship was having the first reunion. And I got together with the first reunion, and I was able to get some photographs that I never knew existed about our life aboard the ship. One of our men was a photographer, and somehow he kept either the negatives or copies of the film of the thing, and he gave me a copy. And a lot of the pictures I'm going to show today were given to me by the photographer of our ship many years. This was in 1984, so I was very lucky to get these pictures. But this is Paul Stillwell's book. Now, to give you an idea how a task force operates in the Navy, I put together some things, numbers about Task Force 58 in the area of March the 14th to March the 25th. What happened in the Navy, we had Task Force 58 and Task Force 38. When Halsey was back in Honolulu with Admiral Nimitz planning for the next invasion, we had a new admiral, Mitchell, come over, took over the fleet. They changed the fleet name to Task Force 58. Prior to that, when Halsey was in command, it was Task Force 38. And the way the fleet operates, we had 4 separate units, Task Force 58.1, .2, .3, and .4. My ship was in .4 on the right-hand side. The way the fleet operated, 3 of these task units were out toward the enemy, and one was back in the advanced base getting ammunition, supplies, oil, and so forth. When they completed all the loading of the supplies, they went out to the fleet, and one of the other units came back in for the same thing plus recreation. So there's always 3 units out. And these 3 units were separated by 30 miles. So you can imagine, we have the 4 heavy carrier, aircraft carriers, 2 battleships on Task Force 58, and 3 light cruisers and 16 destroyers. Usually there are about 2 destroyer squadrons in each task unit. But we also had a task unit called 58.5. And that would be the oil tankers that supplied the fleet. Because when we went out, we were out sometimes month and a half, 2 months, and going out after the enemy. And what happens is, every once in a while, the fleet would come back around 200 miles back east would be the oil tankers away from the action, and they would supply the fuel to the fleet. So that would be 8.5. So this group here, there was a total of 104 ships in the task force. Now, this is a slide you can't see too well. It just describes each ship's name in each task unit. Carriers, battleships, cruisers, and destroyers. So they're there, and I just put it down to give you an idea. And my ship is on the bottom, on the lower right here in Task Force 58, the Franks, the 554, DD 554. And I noticed a bunch of destroyer sailors here. Any of you fellows in this task unit about the same time? I saw tin can sailor shirts and caps. Sometimes we have a talk and we find some people were there on the same unit. Now, just to give you an idea, the largest assemblies ever of a task force in one unit, the amount of firepower, was this unit on this day of March the 24th between at this time, March the 5th, 8th to March the 24th, being fired. Remember the fires they started there. Our fleet, the ships, the B-29s, the planes of the carriers were bombing Tokyo, and Tokyo was burning. And this unit was the largest assemblage. We were going towards Japan. We were about 80 miles out of Japan. We had 4 aircraft carriers, 5 battleships. Could you imagine 5 battleships in one formation? And there were the Jersey, the Wisconsin, the Missouri, the Indiana, and the Massachusetts. 5 battleships. Around that you had these 8 cruisers, 3 heavy cruisers and 5 light cruisers. And around that circle you had 20 destroyers in a ring circle. And then there was 4 other destroyers that were 50 miles northeast, northwest, southeast, and southwest of the fleet. They were what they call radar picket ships. Their job was to identify the planes coming from Tokyo and report to the fleet that the Japs are going to attack the fleet very soon. So that's what the largest naval assemblage in one time of naval power ever in the history of the world. When we were out near Japan, we saw about 10 fishing boats. You know, and we were sure they had, radios and telling the back home that the fleet is coming. You can imagine the surprise seeing all these ships going towards Japan, and these little fishing boats were out there. We got a big kick out of that. Now, here's what the fleet looks like in how the fleet operates. Around here, you have destroyers in a circle. There's 20 destroyers over here. The battleship New Jersey is right over there. The aircraft carrier, the Hornet, is right in the center. At this particular time, that was the flagship of the fleet. Mark Mitchell was the admiral over there, and New Jersey, this was Halsey's fleet, his headquarters, but he was in Hawaii and getting the new instructions. Anyway, there are 4 carriers over here, the Bellwood, the Bennington, San Jacinto, and the 4 battleships, the cruisers. And my ship here was the Franks, the 554. We were northeast going towards Japan. We were the closest ship to Japan, and we were what they call a plane guard ship, or the radar picket ship, to alert the fleet when the things come in. Fortunately for us, when we were out there for 3 days on picket duty, the weather overcast was very low, and the visibility was very low, and we never saw a plane. We heard them up above, and they were looking for the fleet, but we lucked out because later on, those ships that were out there by themselves got beat up pretty bad. So that's the other picket ships were over here for 50 miles out, and 50 miles there, and 50 miles out. So now, one of the reasons we had a collision, to give you an idea how a collision could occur at high seas, you have these destroyers. Let's say if we were in this position over here, and we had to come back behind this carrier over here to be a plane guard ship. Our ship in the early days of the war was a plane guard ship. We rescued 22 pilots out of the water during the war. And that was one of our prime functions. As a result, when you go into the wind, when the planes are going to take off, they first have to maneuver into the wind. When the whole fleet has to move. Could you imagine all these ships having to move at one time? And this ship over here, destroyer, now it's got to be over here somewhere, and everybody was turning at one time. And our job was to get from over here in this position right behind the aircraft carrier and stay a mile behind the carrier in case the planes took off and crashed. In one of the cases, we're going to show you an example of that, and went into the water. Our job was to fish them out of the water. And then when the flight training was over, flight action was over, we had to go into a new position again, and the entire fleet now turns again. Now, we did this for several years during the war, and without incident. We had very close shaves. There was one time we hit the battleship New Jersey, or they hit us, and that's how you can actually get involved with collision at sea. There are many collisions. Just to give an example, the battleship Wisconsin and the battleship Indiana collided in the Kwajalein invasion. The battleship Washington lost 60 feet of her bow. 60 feet of her bow. We escorted her from Kwajalein back to Honolulu, and by the time the ship got to Bremerton, Washington for repairs, they had a brand new bow waiting for her. When she got there and they put her out to sea again. So there's a lot of collisions, a lot of things happening, not a lot of collisions, but there are collisions out there. This is what I looked like in boot camp. Boy, the Japs were afraid. When they saw this picture, they were in trouble. So 141 pounds of fighting weight. Don't laugh. I just graduated high school in 41. That's what it looked like.
When you go to Great Lakes?
I went to Great Lakes. This is a picture of Great Lakes over here. In Great Lakes, I was in company 1895 in Great Lakes, and this is how we slept in Great Lakes. This is the only time we slept in hammocks. We trained, and those fellows in Great Lakes sleeping in hammocks. The first night is the most hilarious night in the Navy, because you put a mattress into your hammock, and then you're trying to balance yourself inside the hammock, and all night long you hear guys falling on the deck, and they had hard polished wooden floors, and you hear a thump, thump. And you'd bust out laughing, and another guy would fall. So all night long you'd be doing that. But that's the way we slept, and the only time. We had a hammock with us, but when we left for the West Coast and we put aboard a destroyer, we had bunks, so we never used the hammock again. Each company in a military base like Great Lakes had a company commander. These company commanders came from the sporting world. We had baseball players, basketball players, were made, given a rank of a chief petty officer, and they were what they call company commanders to make sure the boots were trained. They were trained first to train the boots for about 2 to 3 weeks, 2 to 3 months, and then bring us back to our next station. So Fred Lindstrom was our chief petty officer. In 1976, I was reading a newspaper, sport page, about the Hall of Fame, new inductees of Hall of Fame. But lo and behold, Fred Lindstrom's name was in there, and the new inductee of the Hall of Fame. Now, I knew he was a baseball player, but we never paid attention to it. To give you an idea, the first day in boot camp, he had us lined up in front of our barracks, Company 1895, and said, did anybody play basketball, varsity, high school, or college, step forward. Myself and a bunch of 6 or 7 other guys stepped forward. He said, I want you to go down to the gym and start practicing. I never had KP in the Navy. We were off duty. I was practicing basketball shots and playing against the other company on the base itself. So now Fred, this is a picture of Fred when he became a Hall of Famer in a baseball uniform. He played for the New York Giants, Pittsburgh Pirates, Chicago Cubs, and he was the youngest player ever to play in the World Series at the age of 17. So I don't know whether the record still stands now, but at that time, he was the youngest player ever to play in the World Series. During the Great Lakes, I was there December the 5th, on a cold winter day, and that was when the basketball season was in session. They had a bunch of famous basketball players and football players all went to Great Lakes. That was about the first or second best team in the country in football, because all the college stars wanted to go to Great Lakes, get a commission, and become a chief petty officer, or get a commission as an officer, and they played ball there. We had a fellow by the name of Bobby Davies from Seton Hall University. He was an All-American basketball player. He played for the Great Lakes basketball team that played all the universities around the area. They just finished playing football when I was there, and Otto Graham, the famous quarterback, he was there with a lot of other famous football players that were in college and that were now in Great Lakes. So this is the Great Lakes scene. This when I graduated the quartermaster school 4 months later, took a photograph of that, and then this is the ship that I was on. My first, this will be the shakedown cruise in Seattle, when the ship was had torpedoes put on, ammunition put on, and all the gear to stow the gear for a shakedown cruise. A ship after its commission, it'll be about 2 or 3 months before they roam around and start shooting at airplane targets and firing torpedoes with submarines, and exercises and so forth, and gunnery practice. So then before you got to the war zone, and you're all set. But that's the ship. Back here we have a 5-inch gun, a 5-inch gun, 5-inch gun, and we have 2 5-inch guns there. They were single mounts. The next destroyer that came out, one of the fellows here, was on a Sumner class. They had twin mounts, so twin 5-inch barrels. We only had single mounts. Our torpedoes are located right over here. We had 5 torpedoes there and 5 torpedoes over here. So, and then we had, back here we had 20 millimeter guns, and then we had 7 back there, and we had 7 40 millimeter guns, quad 40s for protection. That was our armament. This is our first captain. We had a series of 4 captains. Captain Steffen was with us, not Steffen, Lindstrom was with us for the first year, then Captain Steffen, the captain who eventually died, and then another fellow who was a temporary captain after he passed away, because the executive officer disappeared from our ship one night before we had a collision. So we had lost the executive officer, and I'll talk about that later on. He was rescued by his ship, the last ship in the formation, at nighttime, about 4:30 in the morning. We never knew what happened to him, but he disappeared. But so this is the first captain we had. A great guy and a good leader, an Athens graduate of 1938. This is my duty station on the powerhouse on the bridge. It's very small. And this is a steering wheel that I used to steer the ship. This is the annunciators over here for the engine room, the captain's chair. And we have the speed indicators over there. So then the compass right there. So it's very small. This is my home for the 31 months aboard the ship itself. So it's very tiny. And We had another bunch of electrical...
Linda Knox, please come to circulation. Linda Knox, please come to the circulation desk. Thank you.
And that's the bridge that I was on. And we have the signal bridge on the outside of that, just a few feet away. It's very small, very crowded. This is our bridge gang. If you look at the kids there, we're all kids in there, 18, 19 years old. In fact, I was over here smoking a cigar to show how tough I was, you know. To get a little older looking, you put a cigar in your mouth. You hope you look tough and everything else, but that was... But these are the kids. This fella here was hurt when we had a collision, Jack Dillon, with the battleship New Jersey. He was one of 3 people hurt. The officer of the deck was mangled very badly. The captain eventually died the next day, or 2 days later. But this was our signal gang. We usually had 3 quartermasters on the ship and about 6 or 7 signalmen on the bridge itself. We also had on the bridge radio men, occasionally we had radar men, sonar men. So that was the area that we were involved in. Henry Fonda is well known for being Mr. Roberts in Broadway. A lot of people don't realize that he started off as an enlisted man in the Navy. I met Henry Fonda, and I'll tell you about that in a while. He graduated quartermaster school in San Diego, California. He was put on a destroyer called a Satterlee. Satterlee. S-A-T-T-E-R-L-E-E. When we were in Bremerton, Washington, and we were nested sometime with 4 destroyers side by side. And one day the Satterlee was there. We wanted to see what their bridge gang looked like. You know, we went over to talk with them, my chief quartermaster and myself. And Henry Fonda was a 3rd-class quartermaster aboard the Satterlee. He graduated from the San Diego school and eventually became an officer, and that's where he got his experience for being an actor on Broadway and Mr. Roberts. So I only met him briefly. We introduced ourselves, but I was kind of proud that he graduated from quartermaster school, same as I did, you know. So, but he was a movie star, you know. Here we go, next slide. When I got to Honolulu, I had a cousin over here, Danny. In Honolulu, the ships in the Navy were crowded with sailors, soldiers, Marines, you name it, all walking down the street looking for a bar. And there was 1,000 men to every woman in Honolulu. So when I got there, my cousin in the Army over here, Daniel Serafin from Garfield, New Jersey, was there before the war started. He was in Fort Shafter, and I was able to locate him, and he came down, I got off the ship, picked me up in a Jeep, and drove me around Honolulu, and I had wheels, and that was his girlfriend. He eventually married her, and she had a girlfriend over there. So I had several dates in Honolulu. I just got there. And the first day there, I'm riding down King Street in Honolulu, thousands and thousands of sailors. I look to see some of my shipmates. They said, hey, Mike, give me a ride, you know. So it was kind of a nice deal for me, because in Honolulu, you had a curfew. Those of you who were there in wartime know that you had to be in by 9 o'clock. You couldn't be on the street, nobody on the street after 9 o'clock, unless you had a pass that says you had a name and address of where you're going to be staying. I stayed at Fort Shafter with my cousin. Now, our first action was the Battle of Tarawa in November 1943. And that's where the Marines, before the invasion, we bombarded with the battleships, 2 battleships. We had 3 CVs, 1 heavy cruiser, and 5 destroyers. We bombed the area. This is our unit. There were other units there besides us, but we bombed certain, like Burial Island over there. And then we get out, a little further out with the aircraft carriers at nighttime, about 60 miles east of Tarawa. The Japs put down flares, night flares. It was like daylight. You could see every ship on the horizon. Just every ship on the horizon. Then the flares would die out. The next day, we went back in, bombarded again, come out again. The Jap Betty bombers were out there again dropping flares. The next thing you know, a submarine came in. We were 2 miles away from the Liscum Bay. When it got hit by a torpedo at about 5 minutes after 5 in the morning, in 23 minutes' time, it sank. And we had the casualty there, 613 men perished, including Admiral Mullenix, who was in charge of this task group. And the survivors are 357. During the war, these are what they call jeep carriers. I saw the battle, this battle, Liscum Bay sink, the Gambier Bay, and the St. Lo was sunk in Tappy 3, which I'll talk about later on. So this was the day of the Liscum Bay. When I saw this carrier go down, We were thousands of miles from Tokyo. Here we are, seeing one of our own carriers going down. I said, holy smokes, I joined the wrong service. I thought it was going to be a picnic. I thought we were going to be out there for 2 weeks or 2 months, beat the Japs and all come home. Never happened. When we crossed the equator going to Tarara, we crossed the equator. Normally there would be initiation, but the initiation didn't go on because we're going into the war zone. On the way back to Honolulu, the first time back to Honolulu after the Tarara invasion, this was like November of 1943. I made this flag aboard the ship. I painted it, got some bunting, and made some grommets and a thing. And this is the flag we flew on our mast for the initiation. When you cross the equator, you become a shellback. And those who do not cross the equator are polywogs. So everybody in the Navy, every officer, every captain has to be initiated. And I'm going to go show you some initiation slides that we had taken. They give you a sum. The first thing, every fellow who never crossed the equator gets a summons. Your name is on it, and things you did wrong. Like I'm a vile and scurvy soul, and being a polywog thinks that whaleboat is an ashtray. And they put a few more derogatory things in there that I had to scratch off because that was terrible. They think they're funny, but what can you say? So that was the summons. You met with the preacher. When you first got the initiation, here's the group of fellows, about 23 of them, who crossed the equator before, and they dressed in their uniforms, anything you can think of. This is Pappy Woods. He's the fellow who heard your confessions. I had to read my confession to him, see, and then I'll show what they did to that afterward. Here's a fellow, he was a devil. He was a ship fitter, and his pitchfork was electrically charged. So he said very lightly, but when your pants were wet, when they wash it down, and you get stuck with one of those pitchforks, boy, you think you're going to get electrocuted. But here's my chief quartermaster. This is the chief quartermaster here, my boss, from my gang, and he had grease on his belly, and people had to kiss his belly. And these are all the other fellows who crossed the equator. This is an officer, this is an officer, this is our executive officer over here. Anyway, that's what they look like. Here's a closer look at some of the guys. There's the barber. We had a barber that had to give you a haircut. No matter how your hair was, you got clipped and you had clots of hair missing from your head. And those of you who run across the equator remember those days. So this officer over here, Eric, is a great guy. Another officer over here, another officer over there. And they all were, part of the initiation. We had officers that never were across the equator, so they were initiated. And that's another group again. There's the minister saying a solemn prayer. When you go through, after you confess, you're going to get your sins washed away. They have a hose coming at you with a full pressure on and washing you down, washing your sins away. And while they're washing your sins away, you're going under a line about a foot high off the deck, and the guys on both sides are hitting you with a paddle. And some guy didn't like you. He put an extra couple of paddles on your fanny, so that's the way we were, one of the initiations. Now, this was Bill Herrick. He's a friend of mine. I still see him. He lives in Manchester, Vermont. He was the CEO of the advertising agency Herrick and Lowry in Manhattan for many years. He was living up in Manhattan. He was a good-looking boy, a blonde boy, so they dressed him up as the ship's baby. And he looked real good. A lot of guys were getting lonesome, I think, when they saw him. But he had on his knee grease, and this is some of the fellows who were stewards aboard ship. They had to be initiated too. They had to go through all the ritual. They had to actually kiss the knee, and if he didn't kiss the knee with the grease on it, somebody pushed his head down. We all had to go through this. Here's a fellow who sat on a hot seat. This too was electrically charged. It's a way everybody got electrocuted. It was wet. You sat down over there, and they would jump. And there's the officer, Eric, over there, and he's saying, my God, somebody's going to kill over here. He tried to stop that, but they never did. Now, here's a photographer. We had to get a photograph taken. So there's a photo shop. There's a big box with a hole in the center, and a guy with a cloth over his head is a photographer. You can't see him at all. And they put you in front of the hole, and you say, smile. And if you don't smile, they hit you with a fanny, and then you smile. Then guy behind the hole has a grease gun and jams the grease in your mouth, and before you know it, you're swallowing grease, you feel like hell. When my train went through, I felt sick as a dog. I went to the doctor. I said, Doc, I don't feel good. He said, what's the matter? He says, I need some pills. I told him, so he gave me some pills. I didn't know, but he gave me pills that make me urinate green. So next thing I know, I go to the bathroom, I go passing water, green water. I went back to the doctor. He was in the wardroom of the oil officers. They knew I'd be back very shortly, They were laughing like heck. To them, it was a fun thing, But this is the captain who eventually passed away. He was the one that was killed aboard our ship. But he actually was fatally injured. We buried him 2 days at sea later on. That's Captain Steffen. He was 6'5". He's also a class of 38 for the Naval Academy, baseball player, basketball player for the Academy. Commander Richard E. Steffen. Look at those guys smiling over there. They know what's going on. Now, our squadron was Squadron 47. We had 9 destroyers in a squadron. Of the 9 destroyers, that totaled 2,900 men, and we lost about 700 men were lost. 600-700 men were lost, and about almost the same number were injured during the thing. I, fortunately, in my ship, we only had 1 fatality, 1 fatality. We had some fellows injured, but they survived. But the destroyers are known as tin cans. And you saw a cap over there with a tin can sailor. And the reason I call it tin cans, they're very vulnerable. The thickness of the sides of the ship, I don't think it's more than a half an inch wide, maybe 5/8 of an inch. And when you get hit, well, you really get hit. Those holes come up fast. In fact, 72 destroyers were sunk in World War II, and many were injured. Now, my boss, the navigator, was an artist. He drew this artwork showing a tin can and a sailor with boxing gloves coming out, and those are the ships over here. We have 2 divisions. There's 4 destroyers in the division, 1 division commander, and the other 4 destroyers. And I was in division number 94. And we always went together. Sometimes we separated, made a part of another group, but most of the time our division was there doing the things we do to fight the war. Now, when we get finished going out into a battle or after the enemy, we get back to an atoll, and they give you beer, hot beer, and you go on this island. The ship anchors out in the atoll. You get on the boat, whaleboat, and takes you to shore, and they tell you to go to tree number 8. That was designated the USS Frank's tree, which meant you'll find a couple of shipmates there with a couple of cases of beer, and they're going to give you a couple of cans of hot beer. So you go there, you drink hot beer, and there's nothing to do. You know why? Look at that. You sit over there. There's a couple of other guys over there. There's nothing to do. Sit around, drink beer. It's hot. And the reason is, here's water. You think in the South Seas that the water would be great for swimming. It was terrible. When you put your foot in the water, 5 inches below the water line, you'll find coral, very sharp coral. You can't walk without getting cut. So you don't see anybody in the water over there. Nobody wants to swim in water where you're going to get hurt or cut. We had one of our fellows was sick for 6 months with some kind of a infection he got from the sharp coral when he tried to go swimming. Now, some of the things to do, have fun, they just make up these, different scenes, and that's the photographer taking pictures. And he caught me climbing the palm tree, getting for that's myself, climbing the tree looking for coconuts. My friend the photographer took those photographs, and now this is some of the groups. So we piled on together. Now, this group could be, this is cooks, mostly the cooks in that division. And they go out to the beach together and look for the tree number, and they get their beer and hang around. And there's a bunch of other guys. These are the torpedo men. You see the cans of beer, and it's warm beer. If you don't like the beer, you give it to somebody. They might give you a Coke in return. That's all we had, nothing else. This is an SP over there. One of the guys had too much beer, and Now we're going back to the ship. We wait for the whaleboat, and sometimes the whaleboat don't come back for an hour. You're waiting there in the hot sun. You wish the boat was going to be there to pick you up. When we finally get back to the ship, that's when we go swimming. Here we swim off the boom. This is the boom that holds the whaleboat in the water when the ship's at anchor. So we climb up the rope ladder and dive off the boom. Now, in 1984, our first ship's reunion, I came to the reunion, and a buddy of mine took a photograph of me diving off the bridge of the 28 feet high, off the bridge. I had an athletic supporter and nothing else on. He caught my rear end view and gave me a photograph in 1984 and said, "Mike, I got one of the best pictures you ever took in your life. Ladies, close your eyes. You don't want to see this. This is pornographic, I tell you. You don't want to see this." This is me diving off the bridge. So he showed it to the entire crew. He had 74 people, the first reunion ever, and he flashed his picture all the way around. But I tell you, my head hurt there. But anyway, I didn't do it too many times. You do stupid things with your Navy. That was one of them. There's a ship. After the war was coming to a close, we had movies on the on the bow. You see the screen over there. I put that up to show you that during wartime, we never had any lights aboard ship. When the war was over, I'm going to show you later on, the war was over, there was no light. We had movies on the fantail, on the bow, while we were at anchor. Now, one of the things that happened, there's an island, Seattle Harbor, Manus Island, was the advanced base before Ulithi. Each time the fleet went out, they would bombard a fleet like Kwajalein. Kwajalein was the advanced base. Then it was Eniwetok. Then it was Manus Island. And then it was Ulithi. So we were in the island called Manus Island, Seattle Harbor, when the ammunition ship Mount Hood blew up. This is a picture I got from a fighter pilot. I'm going to talk about it later on. It gave me in 1990. I didn't know this existed. I can show you the damage this thing did. We loaded ammunition the day before, and our officers said the way they were loading ammunition, something's going to blow up one of these days. The next day, sure enough, we had this scene happen. So that's what it looked like, and here's what the damage was to that ship. This is November the 11th, 1944, the Mount Hood. The trench in the ocean itself, while the ship was at anchor, this is the amount of how long it was. The ocean floor was 300 feet long, 50 feet wide, and 30 to 40 feet deep, where the ammunition went up and down and blew that hole in that water. And we lost 345 known dead, 327 missing.
What was the cause, Dave?
They never knew.
What was the cause of the loss?
They never knew. They never knew at all. In fact, there's 18 survivors on board. They were survivors that were on the beach getting supplies. As soon as any ship pulls into an anchorage, as an airboat goes out, the supply officer and the supply guys leave the ship to get needed supplies. So I was in business in New York. I was in the subway and I saw a Navy sign, and one of my associates and I were looking at the sign. He said, I was in the Navy. I said, what ship are you on? I said, so was I. He said, I was on the Mount Hood. I said, baloney, the Mount Hood blew up, and I was a mile and two away when it blew up. And he said he was one of the 18 survivors. And it was John Higgins from Red Rock, New Jersey.
I was there.
You were there in Manus Island?
Los Negros, the other island.
Los Negros. Did you see this?
That ship went up.
A little louder?
Planes coming across the water. We all dived under a jeep, cut myself up in the car all over. Thought they were attacking planes, but they were our planes.
Yeah.
We don't know how the ship blew up. Everybody on all the ships around there on deck was killed. All the other ships. We went around for 2 weeks. We had work parties picking up one piece of the flesh already.
Yeah. And some of those bodies, when the body's in the water, in hot water, and the weather is hot, it blows up like a balloon. You see that? Huh? They look like balloons blown up. They're floating in the water itself. But that was the Mount Hood. Here we are in the harbor. We think we're safe, and all of a sudden, this ship blew. Nobody knew what happened, how they blew up. I think it was, they must have some kind dropped a bomb or something, or whether it was unloaded. But that was the Mount Hood. Now the Battle of Lady Gulf, the Battle of Lady Gulf was 4 separate battles. Our unit was trapped by the Japanese, and we were in the Battle of Samar. It was the 3rd battle. Surigao Strait, the Philippine Sea, they came in through the Philippine Sea, Philippine Islands, and then Halsey was chasing the other group up north. In this unit, we were tapping 2 over here, 6 CVEs, those small jeep carriers, 3 destroyers, and 4 destroyer escorts. And this group, the Tappy 3, had the same amount of ships, and Tappy 4. We were 30 miles south of this group here, and they were 60 miles away than the other. We were protecting the Lady Gulf landing and preventing any Japanese fleet from coming in to bomb all the transports while they just were unloading all the ships. So what happened is Japanese fleet came in from the rear. They came through the Philippine Islands. Halsey thought the Japanese fleet retired and we went chasing the aircraft carriers up north. As the Japanese were retreating after they were bombed, they came back at nighttime, and they came around. Nobody knew they were there. 15 miles away, we hear a General Quarters Manned Battle Station, Japanese fleet on the horizon. I looked on the horizon, I couldn't believe. 15 miles away on the horizon, we saw the Japanese battleships, cruisers, and destroyers. They looked like toothpicks sticking into the horizon. That's all you could see, the top of the toothpicks. And boy, I'll tell you, we were not too happy about that. Now, the Japanese, this is the first group that went after the battleships and cruisers. And I'm going to show you some of the damaged ships of our squadron. We were lucky. The fleet was coming this way here, and instead of getting in between us, they went on this side of the group and went after Taffy 3, and they got all of the damage. And 3 of the ships got Presidential Unit citations for their efforts of blocking the fleet. We were involved later on. An hour later, our job was to protect the fleet. Now the Japs are coming after us because the other guys were really beat up bad. This is the way this Taffy's operated. We had 6 Jeep carriers. We had 4 DEs over here. They were in the vanguard pinging for submarines. Our job was to stay between the Japanese fleet, which was closing in on us 11 miles away and closing, and they're dropping shells on. This is the thing I put together, showing the time and the salvos and the number of yards away from us. We were fishtailing. Our captain would look back and see whenever they fired, we would turn zigzag back and forth. So this, for 1 hour, we were getting shellacked. Fortunately, none of the other ships hit us at all. But that was the Battle of Lady Gulf, and we lucked out on that thing. When this was over, we joined the Task Force 58. This was the task force. This was the 7th Fleet, Admiral Kincaid. Now, to give you an idea, destroyers, when they go out to the fleet, they're out there for quite a while. Some days, sometimes a month and a half, 2 months. And you need fuel. Destroyers normally would refuel every 3 days because the fast carriers go pretty fast and they use a lot of fuel. And destroyers have fuel that can only last about 7 days, but they want to top off always. So you always have to refuel from ship. This is a scene from our ship, and they're refueling from the cruiser over here. The lines go over, and one of my jobs was to steer the ship between the 2 ships and keep the lines from parting. And one of the toughest jobs is when the water is rushing through, if you're between an aircraft carrier, a battleship, or a cruiser, or an oiler, or a tanker, the speeds are different. You know, they can run about 12 knots when you're steering the ship between going and putting on fuel. Here's another scene. We just finished off refueling from an aircraft carrier, and there's another destroyer right behind it ready to refuel. And later on, she'll talk about the storm, and 3 of our destroyers turned over and sank, and we lost over 700 men with the high winds and the high waves. And one of the reasons why the destroyers could not refuel, here's a picture of a destroyer here now, coming alongside. If he's coming alongside the refuel, and that mast bends over, going 56 degrees, rolling, it could snap his mast off. So a lot of destroyers could not be refueled during that storm. And a lot of the fellows were going down with fuels less and less. Here's another photograph of an oil tanker being refueling our ship. On the opposite side of the oil tanker, you'll see an aircraft carrier. So these oil tankers have plenty of oil to refuel 2 ships at one time and save time. So that's scene. Here's a cruiser now. This is we're getting supplies from this cruiser. Here's a transport giving us ammunition, food, supplies. And this was always a scene going on. Either somebody shooting at you, or getting on fuel, or getting on supplies. And here you can see the fellows here. They have a line. They're pulling these lines over to get these lines. See these fellows here? They heave and hoe, and they're pulling the lines in to get these things over. To get the lines over from this ship to that ship, they have somebody with a bosun mate with a gun and shooting a gun over with a spike on it, and it gets over there and they bring over the lines. Now, we're talking about the storm. The storm of December the 18th, 1944 was one of the worst storms, cyclonic storms ever recorded in the history of the Navy. The winds were so bad and the waves were so high. Halsey was faulted for leading the fleet right into the center of the typhoon. And the typhoon, we saw coming, was black. We went right smack into the center and survived the typhoon. What Halsey was doing in Halsey's report, he was taking information from the meteorologist in Honolulu, who was 1,000 miles away, a couple thousand miles away, telling Halsey what the weather was going to be like. And here we are going through a typhoon. We could see the black typhoon. And you could hardly see at times because the winds were so strong. But the water coming over the bridge, and it was violent. Now, this one photograph is one of the most sought-after photographs in the United States Navy by destroyer men. And the reason is every destroyer man I've ever met claims this was his ship because he could recognize somebody on the ship. And I say, I recognize this guy here and I recognize that guy right over there on our ships. So I say it was our ship. Every reunion I ever went to, they said, no, it's our ship. So how about you guys? Huh? No, this was just refueling at sea. This was refueling, give you an idea what the ship looked like at refueling. Sometimes the water was so rough, you had to refuel because you're getting low on supplies. But that's a good scene. And now, here's what some of the destroyers look like from an aircraft carrier or a battleship. I don't know who took this picture, but I got these from the Naval Archives. These are not my pictures. This particular picture here is not mine. I got it from the Naval Archives. This was part of our storm. And eventually, 3 of our ships went down, the Spence, the Moynihan, and the Hull. 3 destroyers went down. And I'm going to show you something a little later on. This is an aircraft carrier, the Langley, the 2nd Langley. And they had a 56-degree roll in this storm. Now, they had airplanes on the hangar deck below. They were held together by chocks holding them down. The angle of the ship tilted so much that the planes broke loose and caught fire. Here we are rolling like hell. They're rolling, but they're burning. So I'd rather be in our ship, even though we're rolling further and not burning. So they had a lot of casualties. They lost 57 airplanes as well as a result of that storm. So they eventually put out the fire. Now the captain of that ship and the captain of every ship in a formation had everybody run to starboard or port, depending upon the tilt of the ship. Like in this particular case, it tilted to starboard. They went up to the top side of the port to bring the weight down so the fellows go back and forth with the ship's rolls, so to help survive in the storm. Now they're at the battleship New Jersey, sitting there like a nice, pretty ship, you know, just rolling along, getting wet coming over the bow, but they didn't have any problem at all. A couple of years ago, I had a reporter from the New York Star Ledger call me on the phone and said, I understand you survived the storm, your ship survived the storm in the South Pacific on December the 18th. I said, yes. He said, can I come down and interview you? I said, fine. He came down with a photographer and interviewed myself here and talking about the storm, and my comments appeared in the storm. This is a fellow by the name of Ed Miller. He was on the Spence. His ship turned over and sank. He was a fire controlman. On top of the ship, there's a fire control. A destroyer right about there on top is a fire control unit. He was a fire controlman, and when the ship went down, he got out of the fire control unit and was in the water. He was in the water for 52 hours, one of 26 survivors. I noticed a tin can sailor over here with a cap. We have a New Jersey chapter of Tin Can Sailors. Every year we meet in October, and in March, we have a banquet. And Ed Miller every year gives the invocation for the prayer, you know, every start of every thing. So he's still around, and one of 26 survivors. I asked Ed one day, I met him personally, I said, how did you ever survive in a water that long? When the storm is over, the sun is so hot, the sea becomes calm, like glass. And they were in the water, 3 guys on a raft. He said, believe it or not, what we did, one at a time, we would go down below as deep as we could, where it gets cool, the water's colder, put salt water in our mouth, just gargle it, and then come up and spit it out. Get the cold throat cooled off by the salt water. And they never drank any of the salt water, but he was picked up by a destroyer later on. They were 60 miles off course because of the weather from where they went down, so that's why they weren't found. This other fellow's from New Jersey also, from Hamilton, New Jersey, and he was on the Moynihan. So that's the story of the Struck by the Force of Nature. If anybody wants to read a great book about this storm, There's a book called Typhoon, the Other Enemy. It was written by one of the captains of one of the surviving destroyers. In it, it tells about almost every destroyer and the problems they had and how the rescue efforts, evolved. So it's a great book if you like to read about storms like that. Now, as I mentioned before, we rescued 22 aviators, downed aviators from the ocean. When the plane would go down, we were usually normally behind an aircraft carrier and a mile away, and if they crashed, most of them crashed landing or taken off. Here's a photograph of taken by our photographer of one of our pilots coming close to the ship. And they were being brought up by a Stokes stretcher. When the swimmers went over the side, they would bring a stretcher with them. One guy would bring a stretcher called a Stokes stretcher. On each end of the stretcher was one of those shells they used for powder and 5-inch guns that were sealed, so there was air in it. And they would bring the pilot back, and they would bring him up on top here. And when the pilot comes up, this is how it looks when he comes up. Now, some of the pilots we rescued from the ocean didn't come up too well. Some had broken arms, broken noses, and here's one of them that looked like this. His head hit the dashboard of a plane. And when you hit the water, I understand, I never did with an airplane, it's like cement. You just go forward. And usually what happens, a pilot remains aboard your ship about 3 days. And then he is rescued and returned back to his carrier. But not before he gets patched up by the doctor and make sure everything is okay. And sometimes the weather is so rough we can't bring him back any sooner. So these pilots were always very happy to get back to their own ship because they don't like the idea of the rolling and the pitching of the destroyer. So our navigator drew this is an original copy of a certificate that our captain gave every pilot when they were rescued from the ocean. And they put his name in there, and it's the Frank's Home of Drippy Aviators Club. And on the bottom it says the man's name, the time, latitude, longitude. Knowing that on this particular day, pilot so-and-so came aboard our happy home of the USS Franks, signed Captain Big Drip and Little Drip. So this is what it looked like. Now, this is the actual black and white photo of the original color photo. So I'm going to show you an experience I had. It's unbelievable. One of the pilots that we rescued was a fellow by the name of Jimmy Van Fleet. He was on an aircraft carrier called USS Cabot CVL Light Carrier 28. We didn't know at the time, but Ernie Pyle was on that carrier writing stories about the Navy. Now, Ernie Pyle was the most famous writer in World War II. The last I heard of Ernie Pyle, he was in Africa with the Army, then went over to Italy, and then to Germany, and he spent all his time with the Army, with the GIs, writing stories on a daily basis. In January of 45, he came home. He thought he was finished with the war. Even though the war in Europe wasn't over, he was just sick and tired of war. The Navy heard he was home. They got him to go out to the Pacific to write about the Pacific. And he said, okay, I'll go on one condition, put me on a medium-sized carrier. I don't want one of those fancy carriers. So we put him on the Cabot. On the Cabot, we had a fellow named Jimmy Van Fleet, was a fighter pilot. He took off while Ernie Pyle was on board, and took off, and he crashed. He had a blowout, went over the side, and crashed into the water. We were a mile away at the time, and we rescued Jimmy Van Fleet. So we rescued the guy, we brought him back in, and kept him for 3 days, and returned him back. By the way, every time we return the carrier pilot back, we get 20 gallons of ice cream. That was a reward to get the pilot back, especially safely. And so that was the only time we had ice cream aboard ship. That's when we were in port, because we didn't have no ice cream machine. Anyway, so Jimmy Van Fleet got a copy of this. Now, we never knew about Ernie Pyle writing the story about our ship until 1984. One of our men came to the same reunion, and I'm the historian of our ship. He says, Mike, do you know that Ernie Pyle wrote about our ship's rescue of Jimmy Van Fleet? I never heard of it. We made copies and give them to all our shipmates. Took them all home. They made copies for their kids, because Ernie Pyle was the writer of World War II. Now, when the pilot was rescued, now we're bringing him back to the aircraft carrier. He's brought back here by this line, this pulley, and he's brought back in. Now, you'll see the pilots on top of the aircraft carrier, his buddies, are looking down to see whether or not he's going to get wet, whether the ship's, the water goes down lower. So they're all up there watching. Here's the scene over here. You notice they're watching up there, and he's coming back to the plane over there. That's when they want to see one of his buddies coming back, and they're all out there to greet him. I'd like at this time to tell you a story about one of the my high school buddies. Was a football star in Garfield High School, and he went to the Navy after he was in William and Mary College for a while, and the war broke out, and he joined the Air Force and became a fighter pilot. I saw his picture in the paper. I was not in the Navy yet. I saw his picture in the paper. He's a fighter pilot in the South Pacific on a carrier. Make a long story short, every time we went and returned the carrier pilot, being on the bridge, I was always about 60 feet away between the carrier and the destroyer. And I would log in the destroyers the time we sent back the pilot or brought him into our ship. Anyway, while looking on top of the carrier, the Intrepid, it's in New York right now, I spot this fellow Jake Boyle on the carrier deck, and through a signals of hand signals, we were able to communicate back and forth. I didn't see him for about 45, 50 years later when we had a reunion of the high school football team. And I met him over there. He says, Mike, you remember me? And he looked different because I hadn't seen him for about that many years. I said, what happened to you when I saw you on the Intrepid? We brought your pilot back. He said, I was shot down over Tokyo Bay and picked up by a destroyer named Black, B-L-A-C-K. So through a Tin Can Sailors organization in New York, in Somerset, I wrote them a letter and asked them for a listing of all the members who were aboard the Black at the time he was rescued. And these fellows sent me back, you wouldn't believe, they gave me copies of the ship's log showing that Jake Boyle was picked up at such and such a time by the Black. And I sent it over to my friend, Jake Boyle. And he wrote me back a letter and said, he couldn't believe the thin thread of continuity that he said exists between destroyers and destroyer men, and giving this information out. What do we used to call those sacks? Fart sacks.
Because they are bedding, that's all.
No. There was an expression we used to use, pardon the expression, we used to call them fart sacks. Anyway, that's the pilots, that's a scene. Now, when we're in action, things are kind of hectic over here. These are some of the sidelights you get by being aboard the destroyer. You're always doing things. You're picking up mail, you're getting mail, you're going running around and seeing a lot of things. This is Jake Boyle, this friend of mine I told you about, who was a Marine fighter pilot and aboard the Intrepid. That's the one in New York City. Now, again, the fellow is back on the carrier there right now. Now, these are the three swimmers of our ship. They all three received the Bronze Star Medal for heroism by diving into the water in day or night in all kinds of weather to rescue pilots. And boy, our captain, instead of using the whaleboat like we used to use in the beginning, we used the technique of swimmers because the captain would get as close as possible on the leeward side, and the ship would float toward the pilot, and the guys would dive in and get them out. Because some of those guys couldn't last too long in the water. They got log heavy, and they got all this equipment on them. And one of the interesting things I didn't mention this morning or this afternoon, I asked a couple of pilots that I met later on, whatever happened to the gear you guys had? They come on board with guns and everything else. They have knives on them, and they have all kind of paraphernalia. Well, some of the officers aboard our ship became very friendly with them. Come down to my cabin. You sleep in my cabin, And they picked up all the gear, the guns and everything else. So we never didn't see them. But these are the three fellas. Big pardon? Well, the one here is I think that's a ship fitter, I think. And there's a radar man, and the other was a seaman. Callaway is from Philadelphia, by the way. In the Ernie Pyle article, it mentions his address in Philadelphia. This other fellow is from Ottumwa, Iowa, and I forget where he's from.
For radar and MASH in
Ottumwa, is that right? Yeah. Well, anyway, this is a photograph I have of the three guys. Now, Ernie Pyle is the famous guy. He had 200 syndicated columns in the United States in all the newspapers, and people read him. I got this from the Dana Library of Ernie Pyle in Dana, Indiana. See, a lot of people don't realize Ernie was in the Navy also. If you notice back here, he has a Navy anchor on his hat, and instead of the Army hat that he had him wear. And over here, he's got a patch with another anchor showing that he's a Naval war correspondent. So he wrote stories. He wrote 2 articles about our ship, and I'll show you one of them here soon. This is an article, Retrievers of Ditch Pilots, and that's the name of the article he wrote, just the complete story of our ship's rescue. So, you know, when you're out in a ship and nobody sees you out there, you know, and somebody writes about you, you feel pretty good. You get back home years later, you can brag about, you know, something you did. So, or the ship did. Now, when I met him, I met the fighter pilot in Sebastian, Florida. In 1990, I retired from business. My wife and I got a condo in Sebastian, Florida. And we stayed in a place called Reflections on the River. I'm bringing my suitcase in. The fellow coming in from upstairs, downstairs, says, my name is Jimmy Van Fleet from Findlay, Ohio. I said, were you ever a fighter pilot in World War II? He said, yeah. Rescued by a ship called the Franks. My God, we were really, I had goosebumps. I still get goosebumps just thinking about it. So Jimmy Van Fleet gave me this photograph of he and Ernie Pyle. And the other fellow is a friend of Van Fleet, who's a bosun, chief bosun, a bosun mate aboard the carrier Cabot. So there's a nice picture. Just Jimmy Van Fleet over there. And he was he shot down 4.5 planes. He got credit for 4.5 planes. He was not an ace. But the reason they get a half credit sometimes, somebody else said they shot it down, so they split it in half. It was not of a full hit. Now, Jimmy Van Fleet gave me this photograph. It's a double exposure showing his plane going over the side. When I met him in Sebastian, Florida, I tape recorded his impression of going over the side, and I also made a videotape of he and I. I was there 2 summers, and he and I palled around together, and the wives palled around together, and he gave me a great bit of information about fighter pilots in World War II. And his plane went down, and he went over the left port side of the flight deck, and right over the 40-millimeter mount. Nobody got hurt, fortunately. It was a double exposure. If you look on top of the tail over here, the number is 34 and 34 over here. His picture of his plane going down, and he described to me how he rescued himself by cutting his parachute from it was stuck in the airplane. So that's an F-6F fighter plane. Now, this is the other thing that Jimmy Van Fleet gave me. Picture this. I'm down there in Florida in 1990. He gives me a photograph of Ernie Pyle himself. Also gives me a photograph, a copy of the thing that our captain gave him, showing that Jimmy Van Fleet was rescued on February the 11th, 1935. So, you know, it made me feel pretty good. I wrote an article that appeared in a couple of naval magazines, the sequel to the Ernie Pyle story about Jimmy Van Fleet, and I put these photographs in the article itself. So, here's one of the articles I wrote. This appeared in Tin Can Sales magazine. Those of you Tin Can Sales, I don't know whether you remember or not. This appeared in sometime April 1994, I think. Yeah, April 1994. So there's the picture that Ernie Pyle, that Van Fleet gave me. So that was kind of a, imagine, 1990, many years later. So this is Jimmy Van Fleet on the right and myself on the left that had a photograph taken of us. Unfortunately, he passed away 2 years later, and I invited him to Surf City, New Jersey, to spend the night on Long Beach Island with me, a week on Long Beach Island. But his wife called in June. They were coming in July, said he passed away of a heart attack. Fortunately, I was able to meet him when I did. And fortunately, also, I was able to tape record. Now, this unit had 8 separate units up and down, and I happened to be in the unit he was in. If he was in the next unit or next door, I would never have known him. Well, some of the scenes in our ship. This is the Yorktown carrier when it got hit. It was burning. Here's another picture of a carrier burning. When you're in a big fleet, usually the kamikazes come after the bigger ships. They don't bother with the little ships. So fortunately, when you're with the fleet, but when you're by yourself, it's a different story. This is the case where they go after the big ships. Now, I mentioned the fellow that disappeared. We had a lieutenant commander. He was a navigator. Every morning at 4:30, I would wake him up. He was my boss as the navigator of the ship, second in command. At 4:30 in the morning, I would wake him up. We'd go onto the bridge and wait for sunrise, 45 minutes before sunrise, when the horizon was straight across, and I would take time, and he would shoot the sextant and shoot the stars and measure the declination between the star and the horizon. And I did this for years, and I woke him up one morning. I tried to wake him up, but he was sleeping with a 45 on his chest, fully clothed at 4:30 in the morning. I reported to the captain. I said, I don't want to make him up. I'm afraid he might get shot. He said, leave him alone, because he knew there was some animosity between the two of them, and things weren't going too well. And the next day, I went down at 4:30 again, and he was not there in his cabin. And I went back and reported the same thing, and we had a search party going. Myself and this fellow Bill Herrick, the radio man, went through the ship. We couldn't find him. Then the captain said, make an announcement on the loudspeaker to have the lieutenant commander report to the bridge. I did. Nothing happened. An hour later, we got a message from a destroyer saying that we rescued your lieutenant commander from the water. We were the first ship in a formation, a round circle, and he went right through the water, and the last ship in a formation fished him out of the water. So, and they called us, and we never did see the lieutenant commander again. They put him in a hospital ship, and I never knew what happened to him at all. Now, in the Norman Scott that picked him up, I too got information from the tin can sailors about the fellows who were aboard at that time. And they too sent me back letters and copies of the log. In their log, and I have copies at home, in their log it says, we picked up Lieutenant Commander in calm seas, from the water in calm seas. In our log, our captain says, evidently, Lieutenant Commander so-and-so fell overboard in heavy weather. So you have two guys saying two different things. We're just about maybe 5 miles apart. So that was the story. In our ship, we have half the crew members say he was pushed overboard, and the other half said, like myself, I don't believe. Both guys were 6'5" tall, 6'5" tall, you know. So they were the biggest guys aboard ship. So I couldn't see them being anyway, that was the story. Can you imagine an officer disappearing, and all of a sudden somebody picks him up on another ship? Now, in the Battle of Okinawa, we got hit on April the 2nd. I want to show you this slide because give you an idea how tough the kamikazes were. We got hit on April the 2nd, but on April the 1st to April the 2nd, we had 5 destroyers damaged before April the 1st. That's when the invasion of Okinawa started on Easter Sunday. Then we got hit with a collision on April the 2nd. After that collision, we went back to Ulithi, and then we went back to Honolulu, and then back to Bremerton, Washington, to get repairs, because our ship had a 20-degree list, and we were useless as far as a ship is concerned.
Like that list out yourself?
Yes, I did.
I thought you did because of the fact you got it out of the Frank's collision and
Yeah. Yeah, the reason I did that, to show you what happened after April the 2nd. If we didn't get hit by the battleship New Jersey, I don't think I would be here, because the kamikazes after that time sunk, 12 destroyers were sunk by kamikaze pilots that were ringed around the Okinawa invasion. And they also severely damaged 59 destroyers. And also they had 2 DEs that were sunk, destroyer escorts. And now we had 3 DEs severely damaged. So this gives you an idea that 47 destroyers and 10 DEs were hit by kamikazes. So those poor guys, and I was one of them at one time, but now that they were around Okinawa, we were back home, and we were, kind of happy about that. Speaking of back home, I'm going to show you some slides of our damage of our destroyer. This is what this destroyer looked like after the damage. These were taken in Honolulu. When we get back over there. It looks like a pretzel. This is the boom for the whaleboat. The whaleboat was smashed against the galley. At 4:30 in the morning, 9:50 at night, the guys were cooking bread for the next day. They were trapped in the galley, about 5 of them, but they were able to put a fire out. But the actual boat was jammed against the galley door, going to the outside. There's some more damage of our stacks were canted. We had the bridge itself. We only have about 3 or 4 inches of bridge left outside the door on the port side of everything else was cut down the bridge. The captain stayed at his post. In my opinion, he saved our lives by staying there and directing the ship and giving signals to the guy at the wheel. So, and there's the searchlight that was damaged, and there's another shield this is the 40-millimeter gun shield in front of the bridge. There's another picture of the damage. So we're at a tilt of 20 degrees. We get up in the morning and look at this thing here. We were happy we were alive. Here's another interesting story. When we hit the battleship New Jersey, I read an article in Tin Can Sailors magazine. The fellow on the right-hand side is the minister in Georgia. He was aboard the battleship New Jersey on the bridge as an electrician second class and saw the collision. When he read the article about the collision that I wrote, he wrote me a letter. He says he gave me a full detailed 3 or 4 page report explaining what he saw, what happened on the bridge of the battleship. So there's another case of things that happened to me after the war was over. I meet people, and it's unbelievable. His name is Reverend Holzenbach, and he is the chaplain of the Battleship New Jersey Marine Committee. And I still hear from him. Again, we're going back to the United States now, and then we have, now the lights are on for the first time. During the war, there's no lights on, no running lights. Now going back, we have, weather is nice, there's a screen in the back of the ship to, these are the gang, the bridge gang again. The fellow in the middle is my chief quartermaster, myself, and this is the chief signalman here. I mean, signalman first class myself. And then we have the quartermasters, and this was our gang on the bridge itself. You know, it's an amazing thing. In 1984, one of the fellows aboard the ship was on the ship for 3 years. He never once was on the bridge itself, because it's supposed to be like a sacred spot. You're not supposed to be there. So I was surprised to hear that, even in port. So here is the ship going back to the back home. This is the victory dinner. When August the 1645, when the war was over, we were in Eniwetok, Japan, Eniwetok Island, going towards Japan. So when the peace treaty was signed on the Missouri, I was with Admiral Halsey. We were with Admiral Halsey's fast carrier fleet, 60 miles east of Tokyo Bay. Now, my ship was not one of the ships that went into Tokyo Bay in the beginning. No aircraft carriers came in at all, because they're all out there. And Halsey, when he wanted to give a message to the entire fleet, and he said everybody puts on their speakers to hear what he's saying for the whole fleet. He said there's a report that we might have enemy action. If any enemy aircraft appear in the skies, shoot them down in a friendly fashion. That was the report. Fortunately, none of the actual planes appeared. There's a report that Tojo himself, in fear of something happening during the signing of the peace treaty, he heard there was some group of Japanese pilots that wanted to kamikaze the Missouri. So he had that night his mechanics take up all the airplane propellers to prevent any kind of attack on the Missouri. So now we're winding down. When I got home, when I was in Tokyo, I wrote a letter to my sister. She gave it to a reporter. She had to put a newspaper. This is a Herald News of Passaic. A guy by the name of Mike Sepko was the thing. And I described my time in Tokyo. I was there after the peace treaty was signed. Then we came home. We were on our way home. Here, my three buddies and myself coming home. All we talk about is coming home, what we're going to do when the war is all over. And these were happy times. And the guns were silent. Here's the guys, the bridge gang and the quartermaster. You see some of the guys in there, but we all survived, so we're all happy. And now, these are the fellows from New Jersey. I didn't get their names at the time, so I don't remember their names. Only one fellow on the left-hand side is Cooper. I know that from Jersey City. But the other fellows, I forget their names. Now, we're in Astoria, Oregon. The war is over. The Navy Department got all the ships in the fleet out there. They were out there for quite a while. Sent them back to the United States. Had them go to a home port. Went to a home port, Astoria, Oregon, where they had a party for us, and they had Red Cross come out, and they were giving us coffee and donuts on the thing, and we had people come on board the ship to see the ship. And at that time, our ship gave each one of the people who came on board to visit the history of our ship, the things that we did, and the campaigns that we were in. We received 9 stars, battle stars, for the time we were out there. And then they had a parade in Astoria, so everybody was parading down the street, you know, and Astoria, Oregon, yes, that's Astoria. That's where we were sent to. There were 3 ships sent there. A submarine and the cruiser Pittsburgh was sent to Astoria, and the parade was a combination of all the sailors. Now, I was leaving the ship on January the 10th, at Christmas time. I went out and bought a Christmas tree and brought it back through the gate in San Diego, and the guy thought I was nuts. I brought it to the ship, put it on top of the 5-inch gun mount, number 2 gun mount in front of the bridge. And I took a photograph of that so I could have a souvenir. That was my Christmas aboard, the last Christmas in the Navy. And this is a picture of myself leaving the ship when I was getting discharged. In the Navy, when we left the ship, to make sure nobody was stealing anything, we had our sea bags with us, and they lined us up on a dock with sea bags in front of us. I don't know if you other guys in the Navy, but before we get on the bus to take us to the airport, they had us all empty our sea bags in front of us. Line of things, just empty them all out. And then when the officer came by, was satisfied nobody was stealing binoculars, nobody was stealing anything of value from the ship, then we were able to board the bus. And some of the guys had to return back to the ship and return some stuff, you know. So that's what happened over there. Hey, pardon?
They weren't honest?
Well, they just misplaced a few things. Now, this, again, I'm closing with the battleship New Jersey, because if it wasn't for the battleship New Jersey and our collision, I would not be here today. Could you imagine if I was on board the Iowa, the Wisconsin, or the Missouri? I wouldn't be here in New Jersey talking about it because, you know, Paul Stilwell, you know, wrote the book about New Jersey. Anyway, in closing, last thing, President Kennedy had this saying. I had a photograph taken of myself at the Navy Memorial, Washington, D.C., and President Kennedy said, any man who may be asked in this century what he did to make his life worthwhile in this century can respond with a good deal of satisfaction, I served in the United States Navy. I'm proud to say I served in the United States Navy. Thank you, and you're a good audience. Enjoy this. Any questions?
Frank's talk, you must have had some darn good collision control, damage control, because, I mean, the thing is almost could sink there.
You're right. And what happened was the damage was above the waterline. The anchor of the ship just ripped the entire top of the ship off. We had no damage below the waterline. If we did, I wouldn't be here today.
You used to see a lot of ships with whole bow.
Oh, yeah. Well, the one battleship, yeah. No, that, yes.
What was life like, daily life, on that destroyer? Sanitation, food?
Sanitation, food was very good if you're near port or near an atoll when you get first on. But when you're out there for about a week or two, you're getting supplies from another ship. And these other ships are not too happy to give you their good stuff. And they just transfer it over. Now, just to give you an example, every Wednesday and Saturday morning, we had breakfast. You know what the breakfast was? Baked beans, hot cross bun, and coffee. And that was it. So, you know, after a while, you don't eat anything else. You eat a lot of beans. Beans was a big staple. And most of the stuff was powdered food anyway.
Do you have water hours, you said, for shower hours?
We had water. Water was limited, yes. Yes, water was very limited.
Just for information, this is the 100th anniversary of the United States Destroyer, 1902 to 2002.
Well, that's interesting. This is the 100th year anniversary of the destroyers from 1902 to...
Torpedo boat destroyers then.
Yeah.
And yes, it was USS Bainbridge, I think was the first one. I'm not sure, but I think that's what it was.
Yeah. Interesting.
The Typhoon. You were actually in the Typhoon.
In the Typhoon.
You didn't say how much Frank's pitch rolled.
We had a 70-degree roll, and I was on the bridge, and this is the truth. When the ship rolled to the side, it was a slow roll. We had a ladder go to the fighter control deck. I climbed the ladder, and I stood on top of the bridge, which was at a 70-degree angle. Well, fortunately, we survived. And then we rolled back the other way very slow. While the ship is in that position, one propeller is out of the water, and the entire ship vibrates. The ship is going to explode. And then slowly it turns back again, and went down the ladder into the pilot house, and it goes back up and down the other side. And fortunately, the third time, we went into a wave. One of the fellows this afternoon said to me, how come you guys can get this ship into the wave, get out of the storm? The waves are 100 feet high, the winds are 110 miles an hour. We had braided flax twine signal halyards, very strong, and they were shredded in a thing.
Did you try to keep the course into the wind?
We tried that. Let me give you an example. At one time, I was on the wheel. We had a right full rudder, as small as you can, the starboard engine reverse full, and the port engine forward ahead. Full. And we couldn't turn. We were like locked in irons. You just locked it. You had no control. And you're lucky you survived the whole thing. And those three ships that went down, some of them, they were low on fuel. They couldn't refuel. And they just, and some were seamanship.
some of those ships that were lost, they completely capsized.
They completely capsized. And one destroyer, I showed you one fellow, had 26 survivors.
Do you have an indicator on your...
Yeah, the indicator goes up to about 60 degrees. That's how it goes.
55 in
Yeah.
Okinawa storm.
We had 55 in Okinawa storm. See, the Okinawa area, the Japanese area, you see a typhoon around September, October, November. It's a very big happening in that time of the year around there. But that storm was unbelievable. The mast of our ship was below the top of the wave, at least about 15, 30 feet high. You can see the top of the wave. And then when the wave changes, it goes down the other way. You go in, you go up, and you roll. And you try to use the engines, you know. We had guys that have been doing this for years. The officers, you know, they were taking control of the ship. So, yes.
I was on a DE with Happy 2 with your ship.
Oh, you were?
Yeah.
342 now. When they... Okay. When, SESS-IONS?
Pardon me?
SESS-IONS?
SUESENS.
Yeah, I remember that now. Now, you were in the forward part. You remember the chart I showed you that? You guys were in the forward.
Whenever...
May I have your attention, please? The library is closing in 25 minutes. Copiers will be turned off in 10 minutes. Please do all copying and computer printing jobs now. If you need to apply for a library card,
To give you an idea,
now at the checkout
Happy
desk.
3 was lost in our division.
the division also. Yeah, that's right, the Roberts. Yeah.
And they were in the water for I don't know how many days before they...
The other fellows in the base for 52 hours. Here's the fellows in the same formation I was in, the same unit, Taffy 2. Now, when the Japs were destroyers behind the areas, we were supposed to intersperse between the two of us to protect... Huh?
You were making smoke.
And making smoke.
Is that Okinawa or...
No, this is Lady Gulf. This Lady Gulf, yeah. So interesting. Those at the time, as I reported, here's that just came out called "Carrying War" by Paul Stilwell. It's all the famous oil paintings by artists, and Paul Stilwell is a friend of mine. He also wrote the book Battleship New Jersey. He sent me a copy the other day. In it, he describes my version of the Battle of Lady Gulf, seeing the Japanese fleet on the horizon on page 113 over here. So he wrote the anecdotes for all of the different oil paintings in here. It's a great, if you want to give a gift to somebody about carrier war in World War II, it's a great book. It's
You guys must have been burned up against Admiral Halsey.
Admiral Halsey.
Left you and Admiral Kincaid, you're free.
Yeah, that's it.
The mercy of the Jap battle wagon.
That's what they were shooting at us. That's what I showed you.
Worst mistake ever.
We had a lot of brown spots on our pants.
Why do you think all the battleships and big carriers up north a wild goose chase?
To give you an idea, our ship reported that the Japanese fleet turned. And we had a signalman called Catus, right here from Conshohocken, Pennsylvania. Signalman second class. And he came to the captain. I was on the bridge near the captain. And he said to the captain, "Captain, the bastards are turning. They're getting away. Let's go after them." His exact words. So the captain gets on the loudspeaker, on the TBS, and calls the admiral of the carriers. And the admiral, we were the ones that reported, because we were the last ship, the closest ship to the battle fleet. And we reported that the Jap fleet was turning. On the History Channel now, they say the admiral of the aircraft carriers was the ones that reported that the Japanese fleet turned and was going away.
Well, you get the credit.
You get the credit, yes. So.
But the ships that were the decoys went north weren't the ones that came after.
Oh, no. The ships that went north with Halsey, all the battleships and aircraft carriers of ours, and the cruisers.
Different task force.
It was a whole different task force, yeah. We were with the jeep carriers. Any other questions?
Well, that begs assembly of ships every March. Now, was that action take place in the time of Okinawa?
This was Okinawa. This was before Okinawa.
Yeah.
Okinawa was on April the 1st, Easter Sunday. This task unit was going towards Japan and bombing Japan. Yeah, we were bombing Japan. And these are the carriers of the plane. This is my ship over there. This is the formation over here. Yes.
Venn diagram says 50 miles
Yes.
radius on a flagship, 200 miles point to point.
From here to here, it's 50 miles. Here to here is 50 miles. So I would say in between, you had about 12 miles. This is, I think, about an 8-mile circle. In other words, you had an 8-mile circle over here. Sometimes it was a 7-mile circle or a 5-mile circle, depending upon the number of ships in the formation. I put this up to show people what a fleet looked like that was going after Tokyo and bombing Tokyo. I didn't make this up. I got this from one of the naval archives, and I had it blown up to make it easier to read. Now, here's an interesting thing also. Every one of these ships had a name. Like Battleship New Jersey was called Werewolf. The Hornet here was called Bengal. Our ship was called Gimlet. So every time a transmission between ships came on, you had to look up quickly who the ship they're talking to and who's calling who. You didn't know because you had to look up the code name for each ship because the Japanese never knew who was calling who. Now they had 3 channels of between ships. This was the forerunner of CVS. When CVS came out, after the war was over, it first, I understand, this is what I'm told, it was first used by the Navy on transmission between ships called TVS, and they had 3 channels they used. And then later on, they had many more channels. So,
Mike, I'm sorry, but we got to pull the plug.
oh, I'm sorry.
Yeah, there's a lot more interesting stories. You'll have to come back next month. Remember the donations. We need your contributions as well as your attendance.
Everyone enjoy.
Oh, good.
See you next month.